Hello. I think everybody's in place after a long lunch. I think we're all delighted to be here to see the Asan Forum taking place in Beijing. As a journalist who's been based in Beijing for the last 6 years, I'm really thrilled to see this kind of open discussion taking place in what's my adopted hometown. This panel is called Pursuing Peace on the Korean Peninsula. I think we could also subtitle it the North Korean Nuclear Problem. I think we can use the word problem, maybe we won't say crisis. But we have a lot of different perspectives here from Korea, the United States, South Korea. Unfortunately, the North Koreans are not here, China and Japan. I have a panel description that I'm supposed to read, and I will read it dutifully, and then I will add my own 2 bits. The Park Geun-hye administration's trust politique has sought principled but constructive engagement with Pyongyang. As talks on family reunions and the Kaesong industrial complex continue, issues still remain. Despite the international community's best efforts, North Korea has been slow to move towards a more peaceful path. The role of neighbors such as the US, China, Japan, and Russia is crucial to making progress on resuming a productive dialogue. With talks at a standstill, how can we pursue peace on the Korean Peninsula? And, I'm thrilled to report that people are still trying. I've been covering the 6-party talks since they started almost a decade ago, and it's been kind of a dead horse that many of us gave up on. But I think there is, there is some fresh initiative taking place. I'm going to put us slightly out of order here because there's a bit of a, some news. I think there's been an initiative on the Chinese part to get the talks going again. We had a Chinese envoy in Washington, and then recently Pyongyang. So I'm going to start with the Americans. This is Jonathan Pollack, Senior Fellow in Foreign Policy and Director of the John L. Thornton China Center at Brookings. This is a rather long card, and I think we'd rather hear him talk than talk about him. Each of our speakers has 10 minutes. I will time you and then move down the line.
Great, Barbara. Thank you very, very much, and my thanks as always to the Asan Institute for their remarkable job in pulling together these extraordinary meetings, and then conducting them seamlessly. I'm going to begin by making 2 observations about facts, quoting 2 political figures. First, Deng Xiaoping, who said we should seek truth from facts, and second, Ronald Reagan, who said that facts are stubborn things. So let me be as candid as I can be about the long-running saga of North Korea and nuclear weapons. None of us here in this audience need much of an introduction to the fact that North Korea exists as something of what you might call an outlier in Northeast Asia, having gone through devastating economic decline over the course of the 1990s, and now trying to find some way to at least recover minimally, at the same time as North Korea pursues diligently a nuclear weapons capability. North Korea, of course, at this point, has tested nuclear weapons 3 times, and has made clear most cogently in the meeting of a different party plenum, not the Chinese party plenum, but the plenum of the North Korean Workers' Party at the end of March of this year, where Kim Jong-un made clear that North Korea would simultaneously pursue the additional development of nuclear weapons, more of them, smaller, more destructive. At the same time, it was making claims that it would proceed ahead economically wherever it could, recognizing that, of course, at present, North Korea depends, according to some estimates, almost 90% of its trade and economic activities is with China. From the outset of the Obama administration, the president has been quite consistent, insisting that North Korea must make a choice. It must choose either the continued pursuit of nuclear weapons with whatever consequences that flow from that, with the possibilities of some degree of economic recovery and revival. North Korea's response to that is we choose both, and there we are stuck. And as Barbara has just alluded, China, through envoy Wu Dawei, has recently visited Washington, D.C., and then proceeded to Pyongyang immediately after his return to China to try to stimulate, yet again, the resumption of the six-party talks, which have been in recess since late in December of 2008. So you could say there is a process in the sense that the other five consult with one another, but there are no negotiations. And more to the point, going back to my statement about facts being stubborn things, North Korea has made clear. It claims it will re-enter these talks unconditionally, but there's a problem with that. North Korea chooses to re-enter those talks or insists that it must re-enter those talks as an acknowledged nuclear weapons state. That's something that none of the other actors in the process are prepared to accept, even though none of us can deny the fact that North Korea now has developed and possesses some kind of a nuclear weapons capability. So when President Obama met with President Xi Jinping in Sunnylands in June, there seemed to be something of a breakthrough, or at least an understanding that had been reached. After North Korea in February tested a nuclear weapon for the third time, the criticisms in China here were, of course, particularly fierce. Many things were said about the North, and that, more to the point, President Xi made very, very clear that he was opposed to any nuclear weapons testing by North Korea. He has reiterated that, by the way, I must say, in his meeting with President Park Geun-hye at the APEC summit very, very recently. But since Sunnylands, and where President Xi seemed to indicate to President Obama that China would participate more actively and vigorously with the United States in trying to turn back North Korea's nuclear weapons development, there seems to have been a change in China's mood and policy directions. In July, Vice President Li Yuanchao visited Pyongyang, and although he went, as he observed at the time, to mark the signing of the armistice that ended the war in Korea in 1953, Kim Jong-un made no reference to the armistice. He talked about the DPRK's supposed great victory in the liberation war. So there seems to be somewhat of a difference of perspective here. Now, the question to be asked, Barbara, how much more time do I have?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. The question is, now as China seeks to coax the United States in any way back into some kind of active involvement in the six-party process, or at least to have some kind of higher-level consultation with North Korea. The question, in my mind, is to understand China's reasoning. I say this for several reasons. First of all, unequivocally, North Korea has made clear time and again its nuclear weapons capabilities are not a negotiable proposition. They're not up for grabs in these talks. They are an accomplished fact, and that indeed the DPRK insists that its survival as a state depends upon its possession of nuclear weapons and its development of more nuclear weapons, qualitatively and quantitatively, as they have said. And I take seriously what the North Koreans write and say. In addition to this, North Korea openly declared in the spring that it would reinvigorate the operation of its plutonium-based reactor at Youngwoo, which they have done. In addition, North Korea has expanded by a half or more the size of its enrichment facility in Youngwoo, which does not, on the face of it, suggest that North Korea is walking away from its nuclear weapons program. Quite the contrary, it seems to be doubling down, if you will, on that bet. There is nothing in North Korean statements, actions, or disclosures that gives any confidence whatsoever that North Korea would re-enter multilateral talks with the intention being to move toward denuclearization. Chungmin Lee earlier noted that there are two very different definitions of denuclearization. The focus, of course, mainly on the part of the US, South Korea, and Japan is the denuclearization of North Korea, because North Korea is the only nuclear weapon state on the Korean Peninsula. When North Korea talks about the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, they have one meaning in mind, and that is the severing of the US-ROK security relationship. That has been clear time and time and time again, and that's the basis on which they wish to proceed. North Korea would insist that any resumption of the six-party talks would be on the basis it would be an arms control negotiation, not a denuclearization process. That is simply unacceptable to the United States, and to be frank, it ought to be equally unacceptable to China. So the question is, what is it that China sees at present that leads it to believe that this time these talks would be different? What would the goal be to be perceived? Because let me say that in my own estimation, whether the United States and China can meaningfully cooperate on the issues related to the nuclear weapons development of the North should be, and may be, an acid test of whether or not President Xi's convictions or statements or beliefs about the idea of a new model of great power relations has any kind of viability at all. This will be an operative test case. So, what is China's possible reasoning? I would seek from Chinese colleagues, my old friend Xiyu here may have some insights into this, that it may be that China believes that if we do not at least have North Korea in some kind of a context where we talk, things will go from bad to worse. I understand the logic of that. The problem is, from our experience, is that North Korea certainly tested a nuclear weapon for the first time when the six-party talks were ongoing. That was in 2006. So there's no necessary reason to believe that the existence of talks per se would restrain North Korean behavior, although I think on balance, it probably somewhat would improve the odds of it.
Jonathan, one more minute.
One more minute, okay. A few other points about China. China may believe that this may be the last opportunity before North Korea moves to a more fully realized conception as a nuclear weapons state. North Korea, of course, has yet to put a weapon on a missile. Some people believe that they are very, very close to that capability. I'm not going to speculate about that. The other point, though, is that China may believe that this time things will be different with the North. That is to say, China is making meaningful inroads into facilitating North Korea's economic recovery. The North is talking, at least on paper and in various statements, that it wants to expand the activities of the outside world in special economic zones. So somehow, maybe there's a belief in China that in the face of all the evidence to the contrary, this time would be different. I'm, I guess, rather more skeptical of that, but I would like to hear the views of Chinese scholars. To me, fundamentally, and here is the acid test, it's clear that both the United States and China, on paper, say that they are opposed to North Korea's nuclear weapons development. At the same time, China says that it is really concerned about the possibility of what we generally call instability on the peninsula, whether that instability is derived from events within North Korea or an external manifestation of that in terms of the potential for a crisis in the region.
Jonathan?
Yeah.
I think you mentioned hearing the views of Chinese scholars,
yes.
So I might take you up on that.
Right. Anyhow, so my last comment, it would seem to me it is going to be incumbent on the United States to work with China to accelerate cooperation with assurances to China that the intent of the United States is not to undermine or destabilize the North. It is to pursue nuclear weapons constraints in earnest with China as an operative test of how to proceed ahead. I'll stop there and await the response from Chinese colleagues.
Thanks. Since I'm doing this a little bit more spontaneously, so right. I'm going to take up your suggestion to hear from a Chinese scholar next, Mr. Xiyu. Senior Fellow at the China Institute of International Studies for China Foreign Policy Research, previously Inaugural Director of Office for Korean Peninsula Affairs in the Chinese Foreign Ministry, involved in and organized the six-party talks, as well as the four-party talks on the Korean Peninsula in the 1990s. He was also a Pantech Fellow at Stanford University and has given lectures at the law school at Harvard University. I hope you have a more optimistic view than Jonathan. So that's why
Yes,
we're
I
putting
do.
you next.
Yep. Optimistic? Yes, I do. But cautious optimistic. Before we talk about the hottest issue on the on North Korean nuclear issue on the peninsula, I'd like to take a point relating to the broader picture on the peninsula, say peace on the peninsula, because the root of the nuclear issue stemmed from the peace or war question. In terms of peace, I would say on surface, since 1953, both of the Koreas have lived in peace condition, no war like a Korean War. However, the nature, the quality of the peace have been quite poor. At the most, I can say the peace enjoyed by both of the Koreas are peace based on mutual deterrence. It's unpredictable, unstable, and fragile. So that is the unstable situation has been lasting more than 6 decades. So that is the poor situation facing not only both of the Koreas and also the related countries like China, US, Russia, and Japan. So what is the reason for the lasting but unstable peace situation here? I would say since 1953, there have been two abnormal phenomena lasting from there to here. Say, firstly, the Korean Peninsula remained under state of war, technically and legally speaking. And secondly, the Korean Peninsula remained under the state of Cold War, even to now. Although the Cold War has been over in general for more than 2 decades. So both of the Cold War, state of Cold War and state of war make a lot of troubles and make the peninsula in a cycle of crisis. I used to make a joke, say, it seemed to me that there's always a crisis every 4 years, say 1994, 1998, 2002, 2006, and then we have seen the cycle is shortened. Say 2009 and 2010 and last spring. So why the crisis come again and again? Simply because every party related have not reached an agreement to remove the state of war and the state of Cold War. Many people criticize North Korea. You, North Korea, make so many troubles, so many crises. On the surface, I agree with this criticism. But as a scholar, in nature, I would say, even without North Koreans' bad behaviors, who can guarantee under the state of war and the state of Cold War, who can guarantee the Korean Peninsula can enjoy a lasting peace and stability? So that is the key problem in the peninsula. When we talk about solving the nuclear issue, we should touch on this fundamental issue, say we should remove the root of the state of war and the state of Cold War. That's why when I was designed to draft the 919 joint statement in six-party talks 8 years ago, first thing first that came to my mind is how we should make a consensus to remove the state of Cold War and the state of Cold War and the state of war on the peninsula. So then fortunately we got a comprehensive consensus like a joint statement, not only addressing the North Korean nuclear issue, but also addressing the issue of lasting, permanent peace regime on the peninsula. And secondly, let me turn to the nuclear issue. My friend just now mentioned U.S. want to make North Korea make a choice. Say, you, North Korea, must make a choice, right choice to denuclearize yourself. Then you will face a bright future. And that is only part of the picture. And the other part of the picture is North Korea trying to force all of us also make a choice. Say, make a deal with me, or you will face a worse situation. So on the nuclear issue now, we are in a dilemma. For example, we are waiting for the resumption of secret talks. But meanwhile, we are witnessing the every solid development of North Korea's nuclear programs. My Chinese experts told me recently ago, say, North Korea now has commanded the most important equipment that can produce rotors and pipes for more centrifuges for their uranium enrichment. Very dangerous program. So in other words, if we wait endlessly, that will mean North Korea will have endless time to develop their nuclear weapon to where they want. And so that will face a huge, bigger pressures. So they are forcing us to make a choice, and we are facing them to make a choice. That is the very complicated picture now. So how to make a breakthrough of the dilemma? I think we have no any better other choice but to resume the secret party talks. You can say secret party talks is not effective. I fully agree with that. But we have no any other better choice than secret party talks. But when we talk about the nuclear issue, I would say some of the parties cannot understand the Chinese position, and meanwhile, we cannot understand some other parties' understanding. For China's logic, we always say we need to address our concerns about the North Korean nuclear issue. But meanwhile, at the same time, we should pay full attention to North Koreans' concerns. Say, why North Korea made nuclear bomb for decades? They say they began their program in 1990s. I don't buy their argument. I believe they're much earlier. I cannot say exactly time, but much earlier. Why they want to do that from Cold War era to now? I think because of two reasons. One reason is they want to guarantee their national security. Just look at the situation. Even we set aside American military presence on the peninsula. If you compare with the South Koreans' military capability with the North Koreans, equipment, capabilities, and so on, you will find a dramatic gap between the two. Just because of the reason, I never worry about the possibility of war triggered by North Korea, no matter how big noises they made for war. I never mind, simply because the huge gap of the military capabilities between the North and the South. So when North stays in a very weak position with the South in military, in security, the natural choice, attractive choice, of course, is the nuclear. That is a shortcut to rebalance the gap. So that is one reason, say, national security concerns drive them to the nuclear weaponization. But that's not all. Secondly, nuclear weapon, first of all, is not weapon, but is strategic leverage. Any country like North Korea and others, any country that commands a nuclear weapon is often seen as a strategic power. So nuclear weapon has become very effective strategic leverage to upgrade, to enhance North Korea's strategic status quo in this region. So that is the base for North Korea to become the world-class military power, become the regional strategic power as a very important country. So that is both of the reasons for North Korea to drive towards a nuclear weaponization. So I think if we really want to denuclearize the North Korean nuclear issue, we need to pay both of the attention to both of the issues to address the issue. For first concern, fairly speaking, we need to help North Korea. We need to help North Korea to strengthen their security status quo, to let them more secured, not by nuclear weaponization, but by peace regime. But as to the strategic ambitions, I think we need to educate North Korea. For example, how important is South Korea now in the world today? They become more and more important not because they are nuclearized, because many reasons. And by the same token, North Korea can believe nuclear weapon can guarantee their national security, but the nuclear weapon, their national security cannot only be guaranteed by nuclear weapon. The basic fundamental thing is their national economy. Now, North Korea facing two fundamental challenges. One is the security challenge, as I mentioned earlier, security challenge. But the more important challenge is their sustainability of the national economy. That is a more immediate challenge than the military threats from the South backed by the United States. So such a situation makes North Korea in a very difficult strategic dilemma. That's why they raise their new strategy, dual focus strategy, development of nuclear weapons and development of their national economy. So that is the current situation. So when we talk about the secret paradox, when we talk about the deal for denuclearization, we need to take all of the elements and the factors into our consideration. And the simple conclusion is the agreement or solution to the nuclear issue should be comprehensive deal rather than a pure nuclear deal or nuclear deal. So only when we reach such a consensus among parties, then we will have a common ground towards the common goal. And lastly, China's logic on the peace and denuclearization. It's well known that China has a long-time position on the strategy towards the peninsula, tailored by two elements. Firstly, denuclearization of the whole peninsula. I underline the whole peninsula. When Chinese talk about denuclearization, we think about the nuclear weapon-free peninsula. When some others talk about denuclearization on the peninsula, they only think about how to denuclearize North Korea. That's not the exact China's position. See, that's the first pillar. And the second pillar, permanent true peace and stabilities on the peninsula. So that composed our position and policy towards North Korea. Needless to say, there have been a lot of disputes and differences among Chinese. One school is say, it would be better if we can get both, say, peace and denuclearization. If we cannot get both, at least we can get peace and stability, and the denuclearization, let's set aside about that. Allow North Korea to go that. So that's the differences. That's the fact. But for China's governmental position, we want both. China government regard both of the pillars as a one coin with two sides. When you take one of the sides, the other side will disappear. The logic is very simple. if we allow any of the Koreas command nuclear weapons, you cannot expect the stable and the predictable peace and stabilities, and vice versa. Without the peace, how we can persuade and negotiate with North Korea to denuclearize themselves in a peace state? So that is China's logic. And the complicated nuclear issue cannot be solved by any single party. So we need cooperation. So the base for the cooperation, I think, is the consensus. Consensus range from common strategic assessment to common strategic vision. For example, common strategic assessment. We have a assessment on North Korea. Say, North Korea now is in a struggle between revival and becoming a strong, powerful, prosperous socialist country in the world, first class in the world. They are struggling between the two. If they succeed, and then they will go to the first class country in the world. If they failed, they can only keep their minimum line as survival. That is our assessment. However, the United States or South Korea will say, now North Korea is struggle between the collapse and survival. So that's why US and South Korea repeatedly go to China and say, let's talk about the contingency plan. Say, if North Korea, what if North Korea goes to collapse? So I always argue, if a policy was based on assumption, you can imagine how poor the policy will be. So if we, the US, South Korea, China, and others, want a true cooperation for the peaceful solution to the denuclearization, we need to have a common strategic assessments on several fundamental issues like state of North Korea, and also common vision, as I mentioned. What about the future of the peninsula?
I think
we don't have the consensus.
One minute.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Sorry.
We haven't had a consensus about that. So without a common assessment, without a common vision, we cannot have an effective and a good, solid cooperation towards the peace and the denuclearization. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. That's fascinating. I think we'll have a lot of questions afterwards, but I'll move along. I mean, what I got out of that was something I've often heard, that nuclear weapons are the weapons of the weak, not the strong. Although on the strong side, I know there's been some discussion in South Korea about whether to go nuclear. I think some very distinguished people here have discussed that. But on the South Korean perspective, I'd like to hear from Ambassador Chun Youngwoo, who I think has been as intimately involved in the six-party talks as anybody. Again, a long CV, former National Security Advisor to the President of the ROK, Second Vice Foreign Minister, Special Representative for Korean Peninsula Peace and Security Affairs, Head of the ROK delegation to the six-party talks. That was 2006 to 2008. I hope it wasn't your fault that it fell apart. Mm-hmm. You were, yeah. And ambassador to the UK, ambassador and deputy permanent representative to the UN in New York.
Well, we all know that denuclearization is central to a sustainable peace and security on the Korean Peninsula and even beyond. We all agree that the current situation is not encouraging, and the future doesn't look very promising. And as a former head of delegation to the six-party talks for more than 2 years, I personally share the responsibility for where we are on North Korean nuclear issue. The international community has been struggling with North Korean nuclear issue for more than 2 decades now. And despite all diplomatic efforts that have been devoted to denuclearizing North Korea, we know that the situation has become from bad to worse, and North Korea has been resourceful enough to fool and outmaneuver the international community in every step of the way. The five nations participating in the six-party talks, they hold vital stakes in the denuclearization of North Korea, and they also possess enormous combined diplomatic and other resources with which to change North Korea's choice and behavior. However, they have miserably failed to resolve by far the most intractable and serious challenge to peace and security of Northeast Asia. And the six-party talks process, of which I've been a part, looks like the Greek myth of Sisyphus, who was condemned to push an immense boulder up a hill only to see it roll back again and to repeat this action forever. And I think this is time to reflect on why we are where we are. And of course, there is no shortage of factors which may have contributed to the failure of such magnitude. Let me point out only two of them. One is North Korea's determination for nuclear armament has been far stronger than the combined determination of the five nations and the international community to denuclearize North Korea. And we know that North Korea views nuclear weapons as the holy grail of the regime and the source of salvation from their existential crisis, and also an ultimate insurance policy for their survival. Therefore, the North Korean leaders are determined to, they are determined enough to pay a disproportionate price and sustain enormous sacrifices in terms of economic development and the most basic needs of daily life for the ordinary people in order to retain and build up their nuclear capabilities. By contrast, the international community has failed to break North Korea's unwavering resolve by effectively imposing a prohibitive price. In short, the half-hearted sanctions enacted by the Security Council and individual nations have proved bearable for North Korea as an insurance premium. And if the international community could show the determination that they were able to muster to halt Iran's nuclear program, we know that we would not be where we are with North Korea. Although there is no indication that Iran is yet developing nuclear weapons, sanctions imposed on Iran are comprehensive and powerful enough to cover all major sources of revenues, including civilian sectors of gas and oil industries, shipping, and banking, while sanctions on North Korea are limited to entities and items that are related to the military. And North Korea's arms sales, they represent only a fraction of North Korea's exports, maybe less than 20% of their exports. And most of the exports are not detected and captured. So the impact that was made on North Korean economy turned out to be bearable. Secondly, I would like to point out the lack of coordination among the major stakeholders. The five nations participating in the six-party talks together hold an immense combined leverage to change North Korea's behavior and induce its strategic decision to abandon nuclear ambition. And China, in particular, has more powerful means of pressure than other countries. However, some countries have been less enthusiastic than others in using their available leverage. Together, I think they have failed to bring their collective weight to bear down on North Korea in a way that leaves no alternative to denuclearization. With a better coordination in the use of their respective means, I think they could have made a difference. For instance, North Korea was allowed to go around the sanctions in place and destroy their effectiveness by drastically expanding trade with China and thus continue unabated to fund their nuclear and missile programs, of course, against China's intention. As such, what one hand does would be undone by the other hand. And messages sent out to North Korea could have been better coordinated as well. When China puts stability in North Korea before denuclearization, well, this is understandable. But North Korea would take it as a license to nuclear armament with impunity. Even if China changes its discourse, putting denuclearization before stability as it does now, Pyongyang may not take it seriously until such reordering of priorities is followed up by concrete actions to be heeded. So that message that North Korea has thus far received from the international community is this: well, we will be grateful if you are kind enough and charitable enough to denuclearize, but don't worry about your regime stability or survival, even if you don't. And please forgive us if we have to pretend to be angry and to impose some pro forma symbolic sanctions to show our disagreement with your policy. That has been the message. That's not the message we intend to send to them, but I think that's the message they have taken from the international community. What's the way forward? We have been hearing about a flurry of new diplomatic initiatives underway in order to jumpstart the six-party talks. I still believe in the utility of the six-party talks as a readily available and established venue for working out a diplomatic solution acceptable to all major stakeholders. At least it is the final place where any deal that could be worked out between the parties bilaterally, trilaterally, or quadrilaterally should be endorsed by all stakeholders. However, the best time to reconvene the six-party talks is when there is a reasonable chance to produce anything positive and to serve a useful purpose. Another failure of the six-party talks could destroy whatever residual credibility it may still retain and end up reinforcing the cynicism about the utility of diplomacy with North Korea. As a former chief negotiator in six-party talks, I cherish six-party talks very much, but I'm also concerned about any damage that could be done to a minimal credibility it may still retain. And a prerequisite for the resumption of six-party talks, of course, is North Korea's commitment to denuclearization. And without North Korea's strategic decision to abandon its nuclear ambition once and for all, on the basis of the September 17 joint statement, six-party talks, in my view, will go nowhere. It will become nothing more than a talk shop where North Korea would keep playing games while demanding the repeal or easing of sanctions in place, a treatment as a de facto nuclear weapon state, until they find a pretext for the next nuclear testing. North Korea should demonstrate its commitment to denuclearization and seriousness about six-party talks through minimal confidence-building measures, including voluntary declaration of its clandestine enrichment facilities. We know their enrichment facility in Yangbyon. And also it could include a monitored shutdown of the existing known nuclear facilities. Given the sacrosanct value North Korea attaches to nuclear weapons, the chance of denuclearization is close to zero under the best of circumstances. And under the current circumstances, no one believes that North Korea will abandon its nuclear ambition. However, I do not agree with those who argue that North Korea will never give up its nuclear capabilities at any price and under any circumstances. there still remains a chance only if the five parties can change North Korea's strategic calculus. This, of course, is a tall order. The fact that North Korea has withstood international pressure for denuclearization means that insurance premium in the form of sanctions proved affordable compared to the value they attach to nuclear weapons as an ultimate insurance policy for survival. And one way to change North Korea's strategic calculus in favor of denuclearization is to raise the insurance premium to the point of threatening the regime stability. If North Korea is given no other choice between regime collapse with nuclear weapons and survival with them, I think there still exists a chance, slim as it may be, that they will opt for the latter, although I would not rule out the possibility of Pyongyang preferring a collapse with nuclear weapons. Sanctions are not a panacea. I don't believe that sanctions will resolve our problem. But there is also a collateral damage to worry about. However, the sanctions, all we can expect from tightened and really biting sanctions is to change North Korea's strategic calculus and bring them back to serious negotiations. In other words, they are helpful in the way of giving a chance to diplomacy and strengthening the hand of diplomacy. At the same time, the structure of incentives for denuclearization should be made more palatable for North Korea by showing them what specific political, security, and economic benefits are in store for them when they denuclearize. Finally, those countries threatened by the combination of North Korea's nuclear and missile capabilities should work together to effectively counter and defend against North Korea's threats. Such watertight military preparedness against North Korea's threats will help in convincing North Korean leadership that all the scarce resources they have invested in destructive capabilities and the sacrifices and hardships that they had to endure in the life of the ordinary people have been all in vain and ended up making North Korea less secure. Let me stop here.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very interesting. And it's a good lead into our next speaker, Taekeung, who's, I just learned, is now a member of the 19th National Assembly of the Republic of Korea. But before he went to the dark side, as we journalists call government, he was almost one of us. He was president of Open Radio for North Korea, a shortwave radio station with a mission to send voices of hope to the Korean people from 2005 to 2011. And I've got to say, he's been a great resource for those of us in the press trying to find out what's going on inside North Korea. Always very difficult. I mean, this is somebody who I called very frequently. And I think we're going to go slightly off topic to talk about what the domestic situation is in North Korea under a new leader, Kim Jong-un, and how that plays in to the current predicament. Tim?
Yeah, but today the topic is how to denuclearize North Korea. So I want to add some another aspect of we have overlooked so far in making the strategy of denuclearizing North Korea. That is, the state crimes of North Korea. We have seen several countries who experience very successful denuclearization process, like South Africa, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan. But unlike those countries, there is something different for North Korea. That is, North Korean state is making organized crimes, international crimes by themselves. For example, as you may know very well, they export drugs, phylophones, mostly, through China, and this fake cigarettes. They make, according to the statistics by Congressional Research Service of the United States, they make counterfeit cigarettes 2 billion packs annually, which amount to $700 million per year. And drugs is amount to $20 million. And supernotes, fake currencies, $25 million per year. But most of these crimes are committed in China or through China. A few years ago, my colleague visited Dandong and bought North Korean supernote. North Koreans sell it about 70 or 80% worth of the face value. And then recently, more North Korean defectors who are living in South Korea, but they suffer from economic situation in Korea. They visit China and they meet their friends in North Korea and get some drugs from North Korea. But finally, they are captured in South Korea. That means a lot of drugs, are being sold in China or through China to South Korea or Japan. The reason I'm emphasizing this aspect of North Korean state crime is, the negotiation process of denuclearization between, the other countries and North Korea is something like the negotiation between criminal and police. So that it could not be productive. It could not be predictable. So more than 20 years of negotiation process, we all know that very well. The negotiation process is unpredictable and unreasonable, untrustworthy. So the bottom reason is their mind is quite different from other ordinary countries. So I don't mean we just stop North Korea, committing those state crimes automatically lead to denuclearization, but the negotiation could be fundamentally different when they become normal country like us, who do not commit, state crimes. In that sense, the role of China is the most crucial because, those criminal activities are committed in China. But unfortunately, I also know that China is very strictly active in, punishing those criminality, especially including drugs and, the counterfeit currencies and counterfeit cigarettes. But these days, North Korea has new type of crimes, not just Korea, but also Japan and United States. That is cyber terrorism. Several groups of cyber terrorists are staying in China, here in Beijing or Shenyang or Dalian, to make the hacking activities. They attack South Korean, the broadcasting TV stations, South Korean banks, and South Korean government websites. Recently, several times a year, very frequently. But most of those activities are committed in China. Why? If they do in North Korea, the world can see who did that. But if they do in China, they can disguise who did that. So that's why the reason, they do it in China. And quite recently, I personally was also a target of, the North Korean terrorism. So through solving my case, I realized that China is not very active in dealing with those crimes. Look at these pictures. You know, this very charming purple color, you know, horror mask, and shirts sent to my office just several months ago. It is a kind of death threat. You know, it says that you will be dead and you will pay the price for your sin. My sin is, you know, I work for the human rights in North Korea. But the thing is, this mailbox was sent from Shenyang in China. The one postal office based in Shenyang. And my office asked for China to solve this case because I heard that most Chinese postal office has CCTV to monitor the safety inside the postal office. And I also learned that this purple color horror mask is very scarce. So it's very easy to find out who bought it in Shenyang. But I felt that the Chinese attitude is none of my business. It's your business between North and South Koreans. So my argument is, you know, we are living in civilized world. So we all against of these kind of crimes. So China should be more active in stopping these kind of crimes, although it is not targeted at Chinese. So a few years ago, one South Korean man was killed, assassinated in Dandong, you know, near the Chinese Yalu River. The assassinatees used this poison needle to kill him. So several Korean people are threatened by North Koreans. It's very bad. But until now, there is no progress of finding out who did that. So in that sense, I think not just the United States, you know, China and South Korea should be more active and more cooperative in punishing who did them. If we successfully do that, and if North Korea could become an innocent country, you know, the normal state like any other country in the world, then I think the negotiation with North Korea could be much more stable than now, because they are now ordinary people. They are now ordinary state like us. So my hypothesis is like this. Currently, North Korea is not just nuclear country, but also it's nuclear criminal country. Then the final goal is nuclear free. It should be nuclear free innocent country. But the medium goal is, how can I say, is innocent. If North Korea could be innocent nuclear country, then we have much better basis on which we can negotiate with North Korea. So let me suggest Korea, China, and United States, Japan, and Russia, all 5 countries of 6-party talk, have to make very persistent and consistent policy to seek those criminal activities and punish all those criminalities of North Korea. Then we can make much better progress even in the negotiation process of denuclearizing North Korea. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's a slight change of topic, but interesting. I mean, I would mention in this context too, I mean, the Chinese have not been very happy often with North Korean behavior. There were a couple of incidents not long ago where Chinese ships were seized from by North Korean, possibly military forces, and held for ransom. I think those people were robbed, left just with their underwear. And I know the certainly the Chinese netizens were not very happy about it, but there's been some bad behavior directed against Chinese as well. This brings us into our discussants, who I think unfortunately only have 5 minutes. It's a, I guess you don't have a prepared remark, but you will comment on what's been said. It's fortunate that we revert back to the Chinese point of view here. This is Professor Cheng Xiao He from Renmin University. He's an associate professor in the School of International Studies. Previously a visiting research fellow in the Fairbanks Center at Harvard University. He taught China's politics and foreign policy at Dublin College University and China's foreign relations at University of Michigan at Ann Arbor. And he recently published an article focusing on China's relations with the Korean Peninsula and the Indian subcontinent. Professor Cheng Xiao He.
Thank you, Barbara. And also, I thank the Asan Institute for this kind of invitations. And from the speakers, presenters' opinions, we got strong impressions. United States and China have different opinions, different assessment of the internal situations, the DPRK, and also we have, I personally have strong impressions that the North Korea has been and still is a constant irritant on China and our case relationships. So why? I think it's for a number of reasons. One is we have different relationship with the DPRK, China, as Pollack, as Jonas mentioned. And 90% of the DPRK's trade has something to do with China's. But this figure is pretty high, but others experts believe 70% probably is more appropriate figures. And China and DPRK have strong traditional relationships. So China and the United States and our case have a different assessment of relationship with that countries. And for that reasons, the countries like China and the United States and ROK have different approach to North Korea. This is one thing. And the second thing is we need to re-examine all the issues, North Korean nuclear issues and six-party talks against more broader background. The more broad background in Northeast, from my personal perspective, has been troubled by 3 sets of rivalries. So first, the rivalries between the two Koreans. The inter-Korean rivalries has been in place for more than 60 years and still going on. And China, the second set of the rivalries is taking place between China and Japan this morning. And everybody, I think, in these rooms has some feelings toward the ongoing rivalries between China and Japan. And the third, and I think the most important rivalries, it's that between China and the United States. That I think is looming large on the horizons. So these 3 sets of the rivalries actually reinforce each other's, interconnected with each other's, and also have tremendous impact on each country's thinking on its policy toward the DPRK, toward the six-party talk. But we all know, and Chinese special envoy would always visit the Washington 1 week ago, and would we also 2 weeks ago, and would we also visit Pyongyang, and our case special envoy now is in town, and next week, and United States special envoy will come to China. So the ongoing diplomatic activities actually picked up and gained momentum. Even though many leading scholars are quite pessimistic about any kind of early receptions of the six-party talk, but I do believe all the diplomats will not engage in any kind of consultations when they have no hope for any kind of progress. So, but nonetheless, all the relevant parties bogged down over the conditions for the early receptions of the Six Party talk. And I think it's the DPRK is in the very positions to take the first step to break the stalemate, and hopefully we can have the early receptions of the Six Party talk. And we're going to stop here.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying within your time. Dr. Chun Sung-Woon is somebody who I also have been calling constantly for years. I think must know more about the North Korean nuclear program than most other scholars. He's now president of the Korea Institute for National Unification, a member of the Policy Advisory Committee for the Ministry of Unification. Again, a long resume, senior research fellow and the director of the Center for North Korean Studies at Keynote. Well, this goes on and on. Trust me, he's Lehigh. You want to hear from him, not me. So, I mean, what you can tell us about what's going on
Thank you very
with
much.
the North Korean nuclear program.
Thank you very much,
Zero.
Barbara. Let me make two comments and questions. One about the current ROK-US-China, ROK-China relationship, and the other about six-party talks. I think all in this room would agree that President Madam Park Geun-hye and President Xi Jinping summit was one of the most successful ROK-China summit that occurred during the past 20 years. Of course, that doesn't mean that we don't want to see the best of the best summit in the future, but at least we can agree that this is one of the most successful summits. And this summit shows and demonstrates the personal bondage of the two leaders, and also the mutual deep understanding between the two, and also shows the possibility for future possibility of friendship and cooperation between China and ROK. And at the same time, this summit, I think, shows some sign to at least the South Korean public that China would take a different posture regarding North Korea, moving beyond from the previous fixated position based on historical experiences. As a responsible stakeholder in the international community, China is willing to take a fresh look at North Korea and have a different posture on North Korea's nuclear problem. But at the same time, these days we see in Korea different signals from Chinese academics and policy circle, which is that China has had no changes at all regarding North Korea policy. They tell us, Korea, don't expect much, don't go too far, don't have any wishful thinking about China's North Korea policy. So many in Korea these days, we have some confusion. We have two different faces of China regarding their North Korea policy, and we are confusing which one is the right one. And I want to hear from Chinese colleagues that, different from Fu Jintao era, what is the unique characteristic of President Xi Jinping's North Korea policy? Do you have anything that is Xi Jinping's tussle, uniqueness of North Korea policy? And let me turn to the six-party talks. I personally have a full appreciation of Chinese efforts, a very sincere effort to resume the six-party talks, and also to resolve the number one security threat in Northeast Asia as well as in the Korean Peninsula, which is the North Korea's nuclear weapons program. And unfortunately, as you all read, these six-party talks has been in a hiatus from 2008 until today, more than 5 years. So the question is whether this 5 years is going to be a loss of time or a ready period to prepare for the better negotiation and reinforce our determination to resolve North Korean nuclear crisis. No one wants to see this 5 years period as just a loss of time, and we can agree that we want to utilize this as a precious period to reinforce our determination and make a preparation for the better negotiations with North Korea when time comes. Okay, then let me propose, in order to make this 5 years as a preparation period, I think we, all five countries, China, South Korea, Japan, and Russia, we should be different from what we have done in the past. For the purpose, let me categorize two different periods regarding six-party talks. First, from the beginning of the six-party talks in early 2000 until 2012, which coincidentally happens to be in the same period like of the President Hu Jintao era. Let me say this is the six-party talks part 1. And we are just about to begin six-party talks part 2. It's going to be a coincides with President Xi Jinping's era. So in order to make this six-party part 2 as a successful period, and we are inching toward our goal of North Korean denuclearization, first I think we need to learn precious lessons from the six-party talks part 1. That lesson is, I think, as Jonathan Pollack said in the beginning, is the truth by facts. The fact is that North Korean nuclear capability has been quadrupled during this six-party talks part 1, at least in terms of their plutonium production capability. And they conducted nuclear testing for 3 times. And they made a very bold and reckless proliferation, nuclear proliferation to other countries, including Syria. This is a pure, fact. So that fact actually steered us during this six-party talks part 2. So my question to Chinese colleagues, who are very anxious to resume the six-party talks, what of the different position, different strategy, different posture of China under President Xi Jinping's leadership, distinctively different from the previous Hu Jintao era. Slightly minor comment to my colleague Yang Xiwi. You said the China's purpose of six-party talks and nuclear dialogue is to denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, right? And you also add your interpretation, denuclearization means nuclear weapon-free. And I guess, please correct me if I'm wrong. I think South Korea and China has the same interpretation and same concept of denuclearization, which means both North and South Korea give up any nuclear possession or nuclear research and development. Basically, we deny any access to nuclear capability. That is all. We don't have any, denuclearization on the Korean Peninsula doesn't have any relationship with our alliances or other military affairs between the two sides. Am I correct? Or we have a different interpretation?
Let me elaborate a little later. We do have some technical differences about understanding on denuclearization between China and South Korea. But also we have a big difference between China and the United States. Yeah.
But please let me make sure that the term denuclearization was coined by South Korea when we begin to have a negotiation with North Korea in the early 1990s. And that original meaning of denuclearization, which is strictly focusing on both North and South Korea's nuclear capability. We don't have any intention to involve our alliances or American presence or any U.S. activities in and around the region. Okay?
Yeah. Why don't we save this as this is a very good topic for the discussion section, but
okay, finish.
We have
Let
not.
me stop here.
Is it you okay?
Yeah.
With moving on. Okay. So last but not least, it's been time we hear from another party to the six-party talks. General Yamaguchi Noboru, Director for International Programs and Professor of Military History and Strategy at the National Defense Academy of Japan, previously Commanding General of the GSDF Research and Development Command, Senior Defense Attaché at the Japanese Embassy in the United States, many other titles, and he was also an advisor to the Prime Minister's office after the crisis management until after the earthquake. Until September 2011. I leave it to you.
Thank you very much, Barbara. I'd like to thank Asan Institute not only for inviting me to this very important occasion, but also keep the hosting. Asan keeps hosting these kind of very, very important meetings in the last several years. I would like to appreciate it very much to Asan friends here. And my job perhaps maybe to present the Japanese, a Japanese perspective on the issues. And perhaps I have, since I have only around 5 minutes, I have only, I will touch upon two sets of problems, particularly one of them. Two means to deal with Korean Peninsula, for the stability of peace and stability of the Korean Peninsula. All the parties here should cooperate with others. That is a goal. And as Mr. Yan Xiyu correctly pointed out, our overall goal should be to remove a state of war and Cold War. That is our overall goal, long-term goal. And also, I was very much impressed by Ambassador Chun's point that North Korea's determination to go nuclear is stronger than our determination to denuclearize. My 2 points are related to that point. And particularly Japanese have two sets of problems in terms of cooperating others. One is Japan's own diplomatic relations with neighbors. As you may know well, the Sino-Japanese and Korean-Japanese relations are not in a good shape. And as far as we keep that relations, there is no room for the Japanese to cooperate with Koreans and Chinese. So we should work hard. But perhaps this topic should be left for Mr. Kato from Asahi Shimbun and Takagi Sensei in the next session on the historical dispute. And the second set is perhaps related to what all my colleagues here have been discussing, the differences in policy priorities and differences in threat perceptions. I'm a simple military soldier. I tend to look at the map and measure the distance from the center of the threat. Then I found that Japan was located just in between. Japan is close to North Korea, but not too close, not as close as South Korea or China or Russia. And Japan is far apart from North Korea, separated by sea, but not as far as the United States. So that makes me makes me think about the differences over the threat perceptions. There are a number of different threats, particularly one threat to the international community by developing nuclear weapons. That is against the norm of the international community one. And secondly, related to the first, they are developing missiles, long-range missiles. These missiles may pose a physical threat against dangers against a neighboring country within the range of their missiles. And thirdly, the Korean Peninsula is on the Korean Peninsula. There are nearly 2 million men in uniform with arms, and particularly on the northern side, there are more than 1 million troops with guns and ready to fight. That poses conventional kind of military threat, as well as a non-conventional or irregular threat by criminal activities like the National Assembly member Ha mentioned, and the kind of military provocation in Yeonbyeon-do and the frigate sinking things, and plus. So there are a number of different kinds of threat or dangers posed by North Korea. But because of this distance from the threat, Japanese, Koreans, Chinese, and Americans may have different sensitivities about different threats. Then that may result in the difference in the policy priorities. So the countries with geographic proximity to North Korea, such as South Korea, China, Russia, may have priority policy goals in maintaining stability of peninsula by avoiding armed conflict and domestic chaos within North Korea, while caring about criminal activities. Japan has priority goals in dealing with North Korea's long-range missiles, not only to discuss don't develop long-range missiles, but also we are preparing for defense, for protecting our populations by ballistic missile defense programs. And the United States, with support of the other actors and the rest of the world, seem to be pursuing its goals to prevent North Korea from further proliferating its nuclear weapons and missiles. Those policy goals, maybe all the relevant actors may agree with others in terms of achievement of the long-term policy goals. Everybody agrees with those goals. But if we talk about very, very short-term policy goal, there may be difference. So even though we say we don't get unstable Korean Peninsula, while we never admit the nuclear North Korea. In short term, sometimes the priority may be different from between among actors. So my point is we have to acknowledge, we have to understand the differences, and we have to discuss the policy priorities. And bottom line is we have to pursue all the goals simultaneously in a way which does not harm other goals which other actors may respect. I will stop here. Thank you.
Okay. We're up to the discussion part, and I think we had started right in on that. I'm going to take the first question as my prerogative as moderator here. As a journalist, it's always nice to have these occasions when you can't be told, I'll call you back later. So, and for young Xiyu, since I have you as a captive audience here, you said something that I thought fascinating about what you said is you sort of posed that there could be sort of a conflict between a state of peace on the Korean Peninsula and denuclearization, and that we're sort of in a state of peace now because we're kind of letting the nuclear issue slide. That's how I would interpret it as a journalist. I mean, do you see those as opposite goals, peace versus denuclearization? And this is also unfair, but it's a specific question about Chinese policy. I read these statements from the Chinese government again that China wants a denuclearized Korean Peninsula. But I never hear them say, that they will not tolerate a nuclear North Korea. And it's like, will they? And what does China have a red line as far as North Korea is concerned? Sorry.
Now? Okay. Let me take the last point at first. Never red line for China. If there have been, our red line has been broken by North Korea repeatedly. North Korea is the single country that has conducted 3 nuclear tests in the 21st century. That makes China upset, frankly. Especially very close area neighbored with our density population in Yanji-shi. In the straight distance on the map is less than 100 kilometers. Repeatedly 3 times. And it's going to be the 4th. And going to be the 5th, I firmly believe. Now the question of whether or not will North Korea will have a new nuclear test, that's not a question of yes or no. It's a question of when. Because even right now, we are talking about a nuclear issue. They are intensively preparing for their nuclear progresses, both in uranium-based and plutonium-based. And technically speaking, they have commanded all conditions and the capabilities to have more nuclear tests. They can do now, tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, any when. So technically speaking, no out of question. And the issue is the political decision when North Korea want to make use of this nuclear test as a strategic leverage to leverage on so many things. So that's the red line. If I say there should be some red line, that's the red line. I repeatedly. So this fact lead to the other question: say, what is the difference between Xi Jinping and Hu Jintao era about China's policy towards the North Korean nuclear issue and in general China's policy toward DPRK? I would say by this way, simply, no change. As I said, long-time position, denuclearization and peace and stability. Now, North Korea violated both of the line repeatedly. Nuclear, as I said, they have gotten 3-time tests. And the peace and stability, last spring, they fanned out a war crisis. They said there was no question of yes or no. There's a question of when the war will break out. So that, stirred terribly China's very important, vital neighboring area. We want a peace. We want a stable situation to focus on our domestic development. We are now in a very critical stage for remodeling our economic development. That's risky. That's great. For safety of the remodeling economy, we need more than any time before for the stable and the peaceful external environment. Unfortunately, our longtime North Korean friends, do the opposite thing against China. So that is the reason why China has strengthened our policy towards maintaining the peace and pushing forward the nuclear denuclearization. And that impressed the outsiders say, oh, under Xi Jinping, China gets tougher on North Korea. I don't think that is the right way to explain. I would say to explain the opposite way. Because of some bad behavior of North Korea, then China has to do something as a reaction. So that's why, in general, no change. But in policies, we do some changes. For example, we issued an executive order for banning from exporting to North Korea by 900 items. You'll say, oh, it was a news. But I would say it's a political news. Because if you look at the whole PRC history, that is the first time for China to name a single country, especially a socialist, used to be allied country, as a target, as such a banning. So it's dramatic. But the nature of the policy is the same as the previously. Thank you.
I think General Yamaguchi Noboru wanted to jump
I think we have to be careful about drawing red lines. 10 years ago, we used to keep drawing red lines, and North Korea kept breaking red line, and as a result, there was a red carpet. So we don't want to do that again. But question is, again, determination. We have no doubt about North Korea's determination to go nuclear. But we have doubt among us about Chinese determination, Japanese determination, South Korean determination about going denuclearization. That's a problem.
Well, North Korea has determined from their first generation to the third generation, determined to develop their nuclear weapon, become a nuclear state, just like their constitution said. However, there's always gap between the capability and their intention. Not only North Korea, but also US, China. For example, China wants to do something, but the capability is the other thing. So North Korea wants to become a permanent nuclear weapon state. However, their limitations, their limits and the restraints for becoming a permanent nuclear state is a big question for them. As I mentioned above, their national security guarantee, their national security cannot only guaranteed by the nuclear weapon. For more important thing is they need sustainable economic development. That is why the new leader has dramatically changed their Songan policy towards the so-called dual-track strategies. That's our chance, that's our opportunity to bring about denuclearization.
Did you guys want to jump in there? Jonathan?
I'm heartened. I don't think that Yang Xiyu and I have big differences. We have some differences. The very fact that this has been a commitment and an aspiration, as I have tried to argue in what I've written on this in the past, from generation to generation in the dynastic rule that dominates North Korea, tells us, or ought to tell us, that this is something, frankly, that goes beyond questions of the United States. North Korea aims high. North Korea wants to punch above its weight, as we say. It believes it can do so with nuclear weapons. It likes the fact that it's choosing the United States as an adversary, because then that just shows how important in their own self-concept it may be. But I would argue that the fundamental problems in North Korea are rooted in the very character of the regime. If we look at where North Korea is today, let's set aside the nuclear weapons. North Korea, as a function of the choices from Kim Il-sung to Kim Jong-il to Kim Jong-un, isolated itself from the world around it, posed threats to its neighbors. It chose to do this for whatever its own internal reasons. The question that now confronts us is whether we can imagine a different outcome. And that is where I believe, and I think your remarks illustrate this, there is still a continuing belief in China, despite the failures of Deng Xiaoping and then his successors, to get North Korea to think about its interests and its future in a different way. But this time the belief may be that it will be different, that somehow North Korea will be so enveloped if it doesn't become enveloped, it will fall farther and farther and farther behind the world as a whole. Its capacity to operate as what our colleague has said is a normal state will diminish more and more and more. That's not a question of a choice that's being imposed on North Korea. That's a matter of what the North Koreans themselves have decided to do. And ultimately, it will be up to them. But I think the challenge, and I think all of us would agree, is North Korea will try to find a way to seek political and strategic space, exploiting where it can the differences that are there among the other affected powers. Our goal ought to be is to deny North Korea the means to have that kind of a strategic space. Let me say one other thing about the United States. I know a lot of people say the U.S. and North Korean propaganda certainly says this. We want to, undo the North Korean regime. The very fact that there has been no war on the peninsula for more than 60 years should tell us a lot. If North Korea is really that weak and vulnerable, why has the United States decided not to impose a cost or or undermine the regime in an active way? I think that the evidence there is clear-cut. The United States does not seek that. The United States has tried to say there is an option here for North Korea to become a more normal state. Either it chooses that option or it does not choose that option. Consistently, they have chosen not to do it. The question now that we confront is whether it would be different this time and what degree of risk are we prepared to accept, because in effect there are two trajectories. One is the trajectory of their continued nuclear development. The other is the trajectory of, can one imagine that over time a commitment to development and to recovery becomes so pervasive that North Korea ultimately makes other choices. And that's the competition, if you will, or the competing trajectories that we face, and where I think China's calculus is different from others.
I'd like to throw something out, also, maybe to be provocative, because when I brought this up at lunch, it seemed to really rile people. So I'll go back to this. This has to do with North Korea's relationship with China. Scott Snyder was saying earlier that we're moving from an era where we're looking at ideological relations to geopolitical, and I would suggest that in many ways the North Koreans are more afraid of China than the United States. I mean, it certainly has been suggested that their development of nuclear weapons are a way of taking control of their own security and not outsourcing it to China. I would say, from my own anecdotal experience, speaking to North Koreans, which I do a fair amount, mostly, more the ordinary people, that they have some very hostile attitudes towards China and the Chinese, almost more so than to Americans. And I, of course, as an American, am treated very well when I meet regular North Koreans. But towards the Chinese, there's a lot of complaints. And, it's, to me, it makes sense. I mean, China is bigger, and China is most importantly closer. And, I'm curious how in China this is seen, because you guys think far ahead in 20 years. I think a lot of North Koreans can imagine a point in 2030, 2040, where it would be more likely to have a Chinese dominance of North Korea than an American dominance of North Korea. Again, you're closer and bigger and may at some point be richer. I hear that a lot from North Koreans, and I won't go on about what Chinese say privately about North Korea, but there's obviously a lot of tension there, and I'm just curious about this as a point of discussion. I look at the relationship now between China and Vietnam, and it's not so great. And certainly Americans are very well received in Vietnam. Just curious about what you think. Jonathan?
I was going to say, is someone going to speak for China here? No, I think you raise a very, very valid point, Barbara. Look, there is a deeply embedded adversarial nationalism in North Korea. It's directed at many outside actors, not just the United States, not just the ROK, but it is also in a significant way directed against China, even as North Korea depends upon China vitally in any number of areas. This is an old story, but it's an old story that has new manifestations now as North Korea, by its behavior, is directly challenging and defying China, as well as others, in terms of its policy goals and policy directions. None of us can feel comfortable about this kind of an acute potential risk consideration that applies. But here again, I think that although North Korea persists as a state, I mean, I know in the United States often there are these predictions that collapse is imminent. I've said to my professional colleague Victor Cha that his book, The Impossible State, is clearly mistitled. It's not the impossible state, it's the implausible state. There's a difference. This is a state and a system that persists grimly in the face of extraordinary obstacles, and yet it keeps at it. And keeps at it for reasons that often we can't quite understand. But the fundamental reality, Xiyu, as you've pointed out, is those who have suffered the most are the people of North Korea, who have gone from a situation relative to the South of being a more advanced economy until, well into the 70s, to a point where they fall farther and farther behind. And this is the abnormality in Northeast Asia that prevents a true, what you would call a peace regime. Unless and until North Korea, if it can be, move to some kind of normal identity as a state, I think the possibilities for creating a future regional order in Northeast Asia are not good. unless everyone else can act purposefully to make sure that whatever the risks are, that they are managed and that war is prevented.
Open it up to the rest of you. Please, and please introduce yourself.
My name is Zhang Tuosheng from China Foundation for International and Strategic Studies. So I have two questions. The first is to all the speakers, why do you think the North Korea has really realized the weaponization? Because a lot of people believe they still don't have enough nuclear materials, don't have tiny warhead, and their ballistic missile capability is still low. So if the answer is yes, so the second question is whether we should seize the opportunity before they become a state like India, Pakistan, and Israel. So maybe the first step should be freeze the nuclear program. We should reach agreement, just like some U.S. colleagues proposed that no more, 3 no's, 1 yes, no better, no more, no export. Just if they can do this, can give them some security guarantee. It's different from the CVID, which is the Bush administration's policy. So this is 2 questions.
Tuosheng, those are excellent questions. I think that the best answer we can give to your first question is we do not know. There are many assertions, of course, and it may be that in the intelligence process of one or another government, there may be perhaps a more confident assessment, though just because assessments are classified doesn't necessarily make them accurate. But the reality is this: to this point, North Korea has, to our knowledge, has never put a warhead on a missile. It has never, and if you can do that, it has never tested all the requirements for re-entry when a missile would leave the atmosphere and then come back down. It may even be that North Korea's nuclear doctrine, whatever it may be, does not presume something that is equivalent to what the US or China or others have done. It may be that North Korea simply believes that the fact of possession of a certain number of nuclear weapons is the one ultimate guarantee to everyone to leave us alone and leave our system alone, lest we do something really, really drastic. I don't know. But I think that the point, though, that you make is that in contrast to Israel or India or Pakistan, what is it? The challenge that North Korea faces is not the skill and sophistication of its scientists. Of that, I think the evidence is very clear. These are smart, focused people. They have done things in the face of prodigious obstacles. But it's a long way from here to there to have a fully realized weapons program, whatever its ultimate goals may be. They aspire to this. They talk about, you know, and as was pointed out earlier, in the spring they were threatening to attack the United States. Whether they can or not remains to be seen. We don't know. I mean, these KN-08 missiles, we don't know if those are real missiles, if they're just mock-ups or whatever. They would like us to believe that they are real. And I don't want my remark to be misconstrued. Ultimately, they have to prove it. And I'm not advocating that they therefore test a very long-range missile. But this is why, in some sense, we have to take what they say seriously. But it may well be that it's going to be a lot longer than many people may think before they might achieve this kind of a capability, if indeed that is ultimately what they are seeking to achieve.
I'd be curious to hear from the South Korean participants here, because obviously you don't need a miniaturized missile on a intercontinental ballistic missile. You can do it from a short-range missile from the DMZ.
Well, as Dr. Pollack said, we do not know exactly. Nobody has seen the nuclear warheads yet. So there is always a margin of error. Some experts would say they are already reached the stage of putting their warheads on on the missiles. But what I can say is, if they haven't reached that stage yet, it would be just a matter of time. So we have to be prepared for the eventuality that they will be, sometime will be armed with or could deploy nuclear warhead on their missiles.
I think
So that's something. And another thing that Mr. Chung raised was whether we can live with a freeze on North Korean nuclear programs. Well, if it is an interim step toward complete full denuclearization as a temporary step, I don't think this is such a bad idea. But I think a peaceful coexistence with nuclear-armed North Korea is out of the question, not only for the Republic of Korea, I think for many countries in the region, for this neighborhood. So as long as North Korea retains the fissile materials with which they can manufacture nuclear warheads, and I don't know how you can freeze where are you going to freeze their fissile material and nuclear weapons? Technically, it's not a feasible idea, and it doesn't make a real difference whether they have 5 nuclear warheads or 6, 7 nuclear warheads. So that would not be acceptable to any of the countries in this neighborhood.
Let's take one more question. I'm ignoring the signs that are saying please end, pretending I don't read English. So I'll get you in and, yep.
Actually, I would like to offer a comment.
Can you identify yourself too?
I'm Pan Jinqiang from China Reform Forum.
Okay.
I'm not a terribly who want to be defensive of North Korea. But I think that it's just pointing finger to this country will not solve the problems of our future concerns. No doubt, North Korea is an oppressive regime. But there are only one oppressive regime in the world. We see that Saudi Arabia, it is also an oppressive regime. The difference between North Korea and Saudi Arabia is first, Saudi Arabia is friendly towards, is a partner of the United States. And North Korea is not. And Saudi Arabia has oil, North Korea has not. So these are the major differences. And therefore I think that our discussions are fascinating, but I think it's a little misleading. Why? The nuclear issue of North Korea, by nature, is a bilateral issue between the United States and North Korea. Remember, agreed framework in 1994, this is a bilateral agreement. And this is only the extension of the nuclear kind of rift between the two parties. And therefore, why so many questions on China rather than on the United States? I think that in order to solve these problems, as Yang Xiyu pointed out, you've got to address the major issue of meeting the security concerns of the North. And therefore, the question, I think, the United States is there is a kind of consistent consensus policy in Washington towards the North? No. I doubt it.
No.
And also, why talking on the importance of a non-proliferation in this region, while we don't see any kind of concrete steps towards that? Now look at Iran. And I think that Iran certainly is a far greater priority on the agenda for Obama administration than North Korea.
Okay. Very well put. I think we need to continue over coffee. So I thank you all very much.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
The end.